40 years ago, on the exact dazzling fireworks-filled Independence Day holiday, a mother and daughter in Georgia vanished without a trace on the highway, leaving behind a silver Chevrolet with the door open, the keys still in the ignition, and a Polaroid camera lying on the back seat. The entire town of Macon was shaken, the desperate father became a suspect, and Lake Juliette turned into a symbol of unspoken fear. Police dug through every meter of mud. Hundreds of volunteers searched the pine forests, but it was all in vain. No one expected that the truth wasn't hidden in the darkness, but carefully concealed among those who seemed innocent. Decades passed, the file was shelved in the GBI's cold case cabinet, labeled Cold Case G1985-1042, until a young female investigator discovered a small drop of blood still remaining in the trunk, the only clue to survive after 40 years. From there, a journey to uncover the truth began. Anonymous letters, mismatched fingerprints, fake birth certificate copies, and faces with different names, but the same old eyes. The deeper she dug, the more she discovered that this case wasn't just a disappearance, but a secret covered up intricately for nearly half a century. A secret that forces the entire Georgia community to question again, where is the boundary between love and sin, between a mother protecting her child and a thief stealing her own child's childhood? Before diving deep into this shocking cold case file, let us know where you're watching from, and if you love cases solved after decades of silence, don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next mysteries. July 1985, the town of Macon, Georgia, was flooded with the red, white, and blue of Independence Day. The sky was clear and bright, the smell of charcoal smoke and scattered fireworks sounds from roadside homes. Early that morning, Rachel Keaton, 32 years old, packed a few small bags into the trunk of the old silver Chevrolet Caprice, parked in front of the yard. She told her husband, Tom Keaton, that she would take their 9-year-old daughter Lydia on a short picnic north of the city. Tom, a mechanic, was busy at the shop, so he only had time to say, "Remember to call me when you get there." Rachel nodded, smiled vaguely, then closed the car door. Neighbors last saw the mother and daughter at the Highway 41 gas station. Rachel filled up the tank, paid in cash, and exchanged a few pleasantries with the gas station attendant, while Lydia sat in the car, holding the Polaroid camera, and snapping a photo through the window with half the frame overexposed. That was the last time anyone saw them. The evening passed in silence. Tom came home at dusk, dinner cold, the dining table empty. He called Rachel's parents' house, then her best friend's, but no one knew where they had gone. The first night, Tom sat on the porch, car headlights occasionally sweeping across the quiet road leading into the neighborhood. The next morning, he started to worry for real. The Caprice wasn't in the garage, the landline went unanswered. He went everywhere, the gas station, the grocery store, the lake near home, but no trace. By the second day, Tom contacted the local hospital and the nearest police station, but no one had seen the car or the mother and daughter. People in the neighborhood started gossiping. Some said they saw Rachel driving north, others claimed to have heard the car leaving at dawn. No one was sure of anything. Tom stayed up all the second night, looking at Lydia's empty chair next to the dining table, and knowing he couldn't wait any longer. On the morning of the third day, as sunlight pierced through the curtains, he walked into the Bibb County Police Station, voice trembling but firm. "My wife and daughter have disappeared." As soon as the missing persons report was filed, the case was transferred to the on-duty investigation unit. Over the next 2 days, while search teams spread across Bibb County, a new call from the scene forced police to rush back together. A man fishing in the northern Macon Lake area called the police station, saying he had spotted an abandoned car on the dirt road leading to Lake Juliette. When the patrol team arrived, the license plate confirmed it was the Keaton family's silver Chevrolet Caprice. The trail leading down to the lake was surrounded by tall rows of pines, the pungent smell of pine resin mixing with dampness and mud. The car sat motionless amid the weeds, one front wheel sunk into the sand, as if someone had stopped abruptly and never returned. Sheriff Earl Mathers stepped down first. He observed the car with a cautious gaze, pulled on thin rubber gloves, and signaled the forensic technicians to approach. The driver's side door was ajar, the key still in the ignition. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass around. On the steering wheel, faint handprints were imprinted on the fine layer of dust. Everything seemed staged, too clean, too quiet. Inside, the back seat still had a few grains of sand and dry leaves scattered. The floor had dried mud stuck to the carpet. No blood, no signs of struggle. On the leather back seat, Lydia's small crystal bracelet lay draped over the strap of the silver Polaroid camera. A photo not fully dry yet had fallen to the floor, showing the windshield and Rachel's reflection in the pose of driving, but in the left corner of the frame, a shadowy figure in dark clothing faintly visible sitting next to her. The technician held onto the photo for enlargement. A feeling of something off seeped into the still air, as if the entire scene was trying to hide another story. The forensics team began collecting evidence: hairs, fibers, shoe prints, and even tire tracks on the ground. A small shoe print with a flower pattern was clearly imprinted outside the passenger door, just matching Lydia's foot size. Next to it was another set of deeper tire tracks, narrower grooves from a truck or pickup. The Caprice's tire tracks repeated in the same spot, proving the car had stopped, started up, then returned once more. Mathers frowned. Why would Rachel loop back over the same desolate stretch of road, in a remote hill area, over 20 miles from residential zones? In the trunk, police found a half-folded picnic blanket, 2 empty water bottles, a half-eaten box of cookies. No suitcase, no clothes, no documents. Under the blanket, a few gray polyester fibers clung, collected for analysis. Another technician discovered a faint orange wax smudge on the gear shift, not from food or cosmetics. When shown under ultraviolet light, the wax streak appeared as a circular halo, like a handprint from someone holding a burning candle or hot object. They took a sample to the lab. Mathers circled the car. Wind whistled through the trees. The sound of a fishing boat's engine echoed from afar, then fell silent. He crouched to examine faint footprints leading to the water's edge. One was from an adult, flat-soled shoe, the other smaller, possibly Lydia's. The 2 sets of footprints ran parallel toward the shore, but no return tracks. Mathers exhaled softly, radioing for the dive team to check the lake area. They found nothing but drifting branches and old trash. As dusk fell, the crime scene technicians finished photographing and lifting fingerprints. The ashtray had 2 hastily crushed Lucky Strike butts. According to Tom, Rachel used to smoke but had quit long ago. He had never smoked this brand either. A young technician whispered that the cigarette smell was still fresh, definitely smoked within the last 2 days. Mathers noted it carefully, eyes scanning the winding dirt road. At the southern forest corner, he spotted a small glint of light, a piece of red plastic debris, possibly from another vehicle's taillight. He ordered it collected, and the location marked. Night fell, crickets mixing with the crackle of radios. The Caprice was towed onto a flatbed, taken to the county impound. Mathers stood at the roadside, looking back at the now tarped scene. He wrote the final line in his notebook: vehicle abandoned in pristine condition. No signs of violence, possible presence of second vehicle at scene. Initial hypothesis: Rachel was not alone. As patrol car lights swept across the pitch-black lake, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that someone had calculated every step, leaving just enough traces to make people believe Rachel Keaton had simply vanished. The morning after the Chevrolet Caprice was towed to storage, Sheriff Earl Mathers called Tom Keaton to the police station for a statement. Tom arrived in rumpled clothes, dark circles under his eyes, after 3 sleepless nights. He sat across the desk, hands clasped, trying to keep his voice steady as he recounted everything. Rachel left home early in the morning, said she was taking Lydia on a picnic, promised to be back that day. He was at the shop all day, never left Macon. Mathers took notes, checked gas receipts, and timesheets. Everything matched Tom's account. The receipts proved he only moved around the neighborhood, didn't leave the city. Even so, he hadn't ruled out the husband's involvement yet. To verify, Mathers had him take a polygraph test. When asked, "Did you harm your wife and child?" the needle fluctuated, then quickly returned to normal. The result read inconclusive, not enough for a conclusion, but enough to make Mathers cautious. Tom showed no fear, no resistance, just silence, eyes empty like a man who had lost his whole world. Police searched the Keaton home that afternoon. The small house on the southern edge of Macon was still locked, belongings intact. On Rachel's desk, they found her personal calendar open to early July, with a handwritten note, "Trip with L," brief and cryptic. Mathers photographed it, then asked Tom, "Do you know where she planned to go?" Tom just shook his head. "I thought she was taking Lydia out around here." She didn't say anything else. No signs of a fight or preparations for a long departure. The closet was still full, jewelry box and documents untouched. Everything too tidy, too quiet. Mathers sent someone to the auto shop to corroborate. The owner confirmed Tom was there all day, only left at shift end. A co-worker remembered him calling home during lunch break, but no one answered. He was really worried, the man said. Kept saying Rachel had been acting strange lately. The statement was recorded, but not enough for a breakthrough. Meanwhile, rumors spread across Macon. People said Rachel had complained about her husband's coldness. Some even claimed she had asked a lawyer about separation. Each story piled more suspicion on Tom. 3 days later, the Macon Chronicle ran a front-page headline in large print. "Where is Lydia?" father questioned. Below the photo was the caption, "Husband interrogated in Keaton mother-daughter disappearance." The photo showed Tom leaving the police station, hand shielding his face from the lens. Mathers was irritated seeing the article. He knew public pressure could derail the investigation, but the media didn't care about the truth. They needed a story. In a short meeting, he told his subordinates, "We don't have a body, no evidence. Don't turn suspicion into accusation." Yet even he sensed something shady in this case. That evening, Mathers reviewed the file, seen photos, the Polaroid, the small shoe prints and the trip with L note. He felt Rachel had planned this trip, but not why. Instinct said she didn't vanish randomly. Everything seemed calculated, the car left clean, location chosen remote, no personal items taken. As for Tom, since the press coverage, he hardly left the house. Neighbors said he sat for hours on the porch, staring toward Lake Juliette. Lights in his house stayed on all night, and sometimes people heard the radio on low replaying news about his own case. Police still investigating the mysterious disappearance of the Keaton mother and daughter, the announcer's voice said. The husband, Tom Keaton, has been questioned twice but not charged. Hearing that broadcast again in his car, Mathers just quietly turned off the radio. He knew the public had started picking their guilty party in their hearts. To protect the truth, he needed evidence, something strong enough to drown out all the rumors. Before leaving the office that night, he wrote briefly in the report, "Husband not ruled out, but investigation expanding. Hypothesis, Rachel Keaton left voluntarily, or with assistance." A dry line, but behind it lay an indescribable feeling. An ordinary disappearance was starting to smell like something far more complicated. 3 days after the press frenzy over the suspected father, Sheriff Earl Mathers received a call from the Athens Police Department. The female officer's voice came through the line, "We might have a lead on the Keaton disappearance. A witness claims to have seen the mother and daughter at the Bluebird Diner for breakfast on the 5th. Mathers requested the witness statement and video footage be sent immediately, then set off for Athens. In many cases he'd handled, reports like this were usually useless, but his gut told him this time was different. The witness was Clara Bell, a waitress at the Bluebird Diner along Highway 78. She recounted, "The woman came in with a girl about 9 years old. She had blonde hair, wore big sunglasses, and spoke with a southern accent. When I asked for a name for the bill, she hesitated, and said Rose. The kid was well behaved, but seemed scared, holding a small camera, and snapping pictures around the diner. Clara only recognized them after seeing the news about the disappearance on TV the night before. The Bluebird Diner was a small place painted pale blue with an old neon sign. Mathers stepped inside and reviewed the security footage. The images were blurry, but clear enough to see the woman in a blonde wig, accompanied by a brown-haired girl, Rachel and Lydia Keaton. Rachel paid in cash, and the two left the diner around 9 a.m. Just minutes later, a red Ford F-100 appeared in the frame, pulling over to the curb with the engine still running. A tall man in a baseball cap opened the door for them. The truck drove off toward Atlanta. Mathers had the license plate frame zoomed in. Only the first three characters were readable. GA 47P. The technician matched it to an F-100 registered to Albert Devon, 41 years old, residing in Clark County. The name rang a bell for Mathers from old files. Devon had been arrested in 1980 for kidnapping a minor, but released due to lack of evidence. The file also noted he currently ran a small auto repair shop in Athens. Mathers arrived at the address with two local officers. The garage door was half open, the interior cluttered with tools, smelling of oil and rust. No one was there, just a coffee mug with a faint lipstick smudge. A nearby mechanic said, "Devon often came around with a brown-haired woman and a little girl. I figured they were his wife and kid. They showed up at the shop about 2 weeks ago, then vanished after the 4th of July fireworks." The forensics team collected fabric fibers, hair and fingerprints from the shop. On the desk, they found a scrap of paper with the Keaton home phone number, folded in half and tucked in a drawer. Mathers held the paper for a long moment, saying nothing. Clearly Rachel had contacted Devon before vanishing. This evidence shifted the entire investigation. It was no longer a simple disappearance. That evening, at Bibb County headquarters, Mathers presented the report to the officers. Rachel Keaton left Macon willingly, with a third party involved. "His name is Albert Devon," he concluded. "We need to determine if Devon helped her escape, or if he's holding them." The investigative team compared the shop fingerprints to evidence from the Caprice. A match was found on the rear door handle. The next day, a statewide warrant for Albert Devon was issued. Police released a composite sketch: white male, 6 feet tall, brown hair, with a bird tattoo on his wrist. Photos and the red F-100's license plate were sent to every traffic checkpoint. Athens TV stations updated continuously, calling it the unexpected twist in the Keaton mother-daughter disappearance. Mathers returned to his office and replayed the final frame from the video. Devon standing by the open truck door, Rachel and Lydia stepping in, then sunlight obscuring everything. A strange feeling rose in him. Rachel didn't appear coerced. Her movements were calm, not panicked, no struggle. Maybe she'd left for her own reasons, not for anyone else. But if so, why leave the car in the woods and Lydia's necklace? Mathers closed the file, gazing out the window at the sunset-draped frame. He knew from now on, the Keaton case had shifted to a different nature, no longer searching for the missing, but tracing a lie that began right within that family. After the warrant for Albert Devon was issued, Sheriff Earl Mathers returned to the Chevrolet Caprice, the only intact piece of evidence left. The car sat in the Macon Police Department's evidence garage, sealed since day one. When the forensics team reopened it for re-examination, a technician spotted a small dark brown streak on the metal edge inside the trunk. Under ultraviolet light, it showed as a faint circular smudge, no bigger than a fingernail. Mathers signaled to collect a sample, his eyes fixed on the tiny spot. "Don't underestimate it," he said. "It might tell us more than any witness statement." The sample was sent to the department's lab. DNA technology wasn't widespread in 1985, so they relied on classic blood typing. 3 days later, the results came back blood type O female. It didn't match Lydia type A per hospital records. Mathers read the report and felt his heart tighten. If it was Rachel's blood, she was still alive when she left the car, but why was she injured, and why was the blood in the trunk? Upon re-examination, the forensics team noted the blood wasn't splattered, no signs of cleanup, just a small smear like someone injured touching the trunk edge while closing it. A normal action, but not if she'd been attacked. This led Mathers to believe Rachel had left the car voluntarily, possibly with a minor injury during transport. Just then a report from Athens arrived. The Bluebird Diner witness recalled the blonde-haired woman, with a small bandage on her right wrist, holding her coffee cup with her left hand. She seemed calm but tense. Mathers pieced it together and reached his first conclusion. The trunk blood is most likely Rachel Keaton's minor injury, still alive when she left the car. In the morning briefing, Mathers presented, she was injured, but no signs of assault. Rachel may have fled with Devon, deliberately staging a fake scene. An officer asked, if so, why leave Lydia's necklace behind? Mathers replied curtly, because she wanted us to believe they were harmed. To verify, the trunk fabric samples were sent to the state lab in Atlanta. Results showed gray polyester fibers, matching those collected from Devon's shop. This evidence solidified the Rachel aided by Devon hypothesis. Mathers noted in his log, the two left Macon together, prepared. He reviewed the Polaroid found in the car. The windshield reflection showed the shadow of a man in a baseball cap sitting next to Rachel, a detail matching Devon. Unease welled up. Rachel wasn't forced, she'd chosen to go with him. But what was the purpose? When word of the blood discovery leaked, the press ran with it. Police find blood in Keaton family car, suspected to be the mother's. Public scrutiny turned back on Tom Keaton. Mathers, furious, ordered the real results kept under wraps. He knew the media was derailing the investigation. That evening, Mathers sat alone in the empty office, the Rachel Keaton file before him. Her wedding photo in a white dress, gentle gaze, now looked like an enigma. He'd encountered many fleeing women, but few prepared this meticulously. The car placed just so clean, leaving only a small blood trace and misleading clues. Mathers wrote in the end-of-day report, blood sample confirmed type O, female, no match for Lydia, high likelihood, Rachel Keaton sustained minor injury during departure from Macon. Hypothesis, voluntary flight, assisted by subject Albert Devon. As he closed the file, Georgia night fell outside. In the darkness, the Keaton mother-daughter disappearance was no longer a simple family tragedy, but a sophisticated game between a woman who knew how to erase traces, and a man with a shady past, helping her vanish from the world. A week after the blood test results, Sheriff Earl Mathers received a brown envelope at the station, no return address. The postmark was faint, showing only Athens, Georgia. Inside was a typed note with a short message. She did what she had to do. Don't look for them. No signature, nothing else. Mathers read it over and over, feeling like someone was taunting him. The words were cold, not a warning, but a command. He sent it straight to forensics. Results: female fingerprints, no match in the Georgia state database. Small size, fine whorls, likely from a woman unaccustomed to heavy labor. Investigation at the post office showed the letter dropped in a public mailbox, downtown Athens, near the Bluebird Diner where Rachel had appeared. Footage was blurry, no identification. The envelope was standard, paper from an old typewriter, no fibers or hairs. Someone had prepared meticulously, nearly erasing all traces. While the team traced the letter's origin, another clue surfaced unexpectedly from the Macon Central Library, where Rachel had worked part-time. An employee named Helen Ward reported something odd in the library's internal logbook. Rachel managed this ledger, noting shifts and work notes. On the final page, dated June 30th, there were two different handwritings. The first Rachel's, the latter stiff and slanted sharply, like an imitation attempt. The last line read, "I need some time away. Eel and I will be fine, don't worry." Forensics confirmed the handwritings differed by nearly 40%. An expert concluded, very likely someone added it to create the impression Rachel left voluntarily. Mathers read the report, and immediately thought of Devon. He ordered a comparison of the anonymous letter's typewriter font to samples seized from Devon's shop. It matched the O characters skewed right, a trait of the 1978 Smith Corona model, the same type found in Devon's shop. Additionally, in a wooden desk drawer at the shop, police found an old ink ribbon spool still imprinted with, "She did what she had to do." No doubt, the letter was typed on Devon's machine. He was scripting the fleeing mother narrative. Mathers slowly set the report down. If Devon controls the information going out, he said, Rachel may not have been free for a long time. The case escalated to special investigation status. Mathers requested a full review of Rachel's personal documents, handwritten letters, bills, banknotes. The finance report showed that 2 months before vanishing, she'd withdrawn nearly $3,000 in savings. The money was unaccounted for, and no one knew what she'd used it for. In the same period, Devon bought an old pickup truck under another name, then disappeared from Athens the week Rachel left Macon. Mathers sat in his office, staring at the typed letter on yellowed paper, the rigid words cold as the voice of someone in control. He realized this wasn't just a disappearance, there was a guiding hand, someone rewriting the story, turning Rachel into the runaway mom, while the truth might be darker. That night, he reviewed photos of Rachel with Lydia, the woman's eyes averted from the lens, smile forced. Mathers muttered, she knew something was coming. He wrote the final line in the report, anonymous letter produced on Albert Devon's typewriter, diary altered. High probability, Rachel Keaton was coerced into leaving Macon. Next objective, determine if she's still alive. The dim yellow lamplight cast down on the paper, the threatening words still there. Don't look for them. Mathers smiled faintly coldly. Wrong, I will find them. Nearly a year after Rachel and Lydia Keaton disappeared, the Bibb County Sheriff's Office still hadn't uncovered any new leads. The hunt for Albert Devon extended all the way to Alabama and Tennessee, but no one had seen him or his red Ford F-100 since the summer of 1985. All traces stopped in Athens, at the post office where the anonymous letter was mailed. After dozens of searches, hundreds of pages of reports, and thousands of hours of investigation, the file was still full of unanswered questions. By the fall of 1986, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, was tasked with reviewing the entire case to decide whether to continue expanding the investigation. They re-examined all the evidence, the bloodstains in the trunk, the anonymous letter, the library checkout log, the female fingerprints. None of the samples matched the state's newly updated database. The letter couldn't be traced to a specific source, and the ink ribbon spool from Devon's workshop wasn't enough to build a case. The report concluded, insufficient grounds to identify a crime, victims may have left the state voluntarily. Sheriff Mathers sat silently at his desk when he received the summary. He'd hoped the GBI would find something, anything, but it all led to a dead end. All signs indicated Rachel was still alive when she left Macon, and if she'd gone with Devon, she very likely chose to. But Mathers still couldn't believe Rachel had voluntarily vanished, leaving behind her young child and a husband on the brink of collapse. No one disappears that cleanly, he murmured as he signed the bottom of the report. On December 14, 1986, the case was officially closed. The file marked cold case hash G1985-1042 was transferred to the GBI's archives in Atlanta. A steel filing cabinet, hundreds of thick case files, and among them was the beige folder scrawled with Keaton, Rachel and Lydia, missing persons. Mathers placed it on the shelf himself, his gaze distant. Don't close it away too long, he instructed the archivist clerk, because the missing are still waiting to come home. For Tom Keaton, 1986 ended like a nightmare that never let up. After the case went cold, he quit his job at the plant, sold the little house in Macon, and moved back to live near his parents in Warner Robins. The media, which had hounded him daily, now only occasionally referenced the case as a runaway wife with daughter story. By year's end, the GBI officially cleared Tom of suspicion after verifying his alibi matched the exact time Rachel left home. A short blurb in the Macon Chronicle on December 27 ran a small item on page 3, Keaton case closed, authorities determine no foul play. Keaton case closed, authorities determine no foul play. Beneath the headline was an old photo of Tom in shadow, his face gaunt, eyes staring into the distance. Folks in town skimmed over it, then folded the paper back up. To them, the case was over. But to Mathers, it was just dormant. He still kept a copy of the anonymous letter in his desk drawer, pulling it out now and then to look at it. Each time he read the words, "Don't look for them," he felt something wasn't right. A professional instinct, or just an obsession. The GBI's final report spanned 18 pages, clearly stating the conclusions: no signs of crime at the scene. Mother's blood type O indicates minor, non-life-threatening injury. No evidence that the mother and child were coerced. The man named Albert Devon was not found, and may have left the state. Case classified as voluntary disappearance. Tom Keaton received the case closure notice by mail. He read it over and over, then tucked it into the kitchen cabinet, alongside the faded family photos. He told his mother, "If they say she ran off, then I guess I have to believe it." But everyone knew Tom left the living room light on every night, as if Rachel might come back any moment. Time passed, and the Keaton file faded into obscurity. Only occasionally, when Mathers walked by the archives, would he glance at the iron cabinet in row G, where the file lay quietly. He knew this case still had something unsaid, a hand that had manipulated, a story not yet closed. But at that point, all evidence was exhausted, and procedure demanded the file be shut. In the final internal report, Mathers added a marginal note: "If forensic technology advances in the future, recommend retesting all Keaton case samples." No one paid attention to that note. File hash G1985-1042 was placed in the third drawer, labeled cold case, and sank into oblivion for nearly 4 decades. The disappearance of Rachel and Lydia Keaton officially became one of Georgia's quietest mysteries, a story buried in a cold file cabinet, where the lies continued to sleep undisturbed. 33 years after the Keaton case was closed, cold case file hash G1985-1042 still lay dormant in the GBI archives in Atlanta, covered in dust, and as silent as the 2 names inside it. By October 2018, when the GBI launched a review campaign for pre-1990 missing persons cases, this file was pulled again. The program's goal was to leverage modern DNA technology to revive cases stalled by technical limitations. In a list of nearly 500 cases, the name Keaton, Rachel and Lydia appeared 12th, because intact blood samples were still preserved in the evidence vault. In 2023, the case was assigned to Detective Nora Ellis, a young investigator renowned for cracking multiple cold cases using trace DNA testing. When she received the thick yellowed file, Ellis only whispered, "38 years, but the fear in here is still fresh." Ellis started with the blood sample from the Chevrolet Caprice trunk. The evidence was sent to the GBI crime lab in Decatur, where they were testing a new generation of mixed DNA separation technology. After 2 weeks, the results stunned the entire team. 50% matched Rachel Keaton's DNA. The rest was unidentified male DNA. Genetic analysis showed the male sample belonged to someone of southeastern U.S. descent, aged 35, 45, in 1985. Ellis immediately cross-referenced it with Tom Keaton's file, no match. That confirmed Tom's innocence, and opened a new hypothesis: Rachel had been with another man when she vanished. While checking the evidence locker, Ellis noticed an envelope labeled "Miscellaneous, Trunk." Inside, among fabric scraps and debris, she found a torn bus ticket stub. The paper was yellowed, but the words were still legible: Macon, Asheville. The text was faint, torn right at the date stamp, but the print style matched 1980s Greyhound tickets. Ellis sent the paper sample to the lab for testing. Results: it bore traces of female DNA matching Rachel Keaton. She cross-checked old bus schedules. The Greyhound Macon, Asheville route departed every morning at 9:45, just hours after Rachel and Lydia were last seen in Athens. Ellis stood before a map, tracing the route from Macon to Athens, then north, straight to Asheville. If they took that bus, she said, then the Caprice left behind was bait. Ellis reported the discovery to GBI Command. The summary stated clearly, Female DNA in trunk matches Rachel Keaton. Unidentified male DNA, no match to Tom Keaton. Bus ticket Macon, Asheville bears Rachel's DNA. Recommend expanding investigation to North Carolina. In a meeting at GBI Cold Case Unit headquarters, Lieutenant Colonel Sam Rowe read the report carefully, then asked, "Do you think Rachel's still alive?" Ellis replied, "I don't know. But someone wanted us to believe they were dead." That night, Ellis returned to the archives to re-examine the evidence. She found crime scene photos of the car from 1985 and noticed a detail few had paid attention to before. On the driver's seat was a local newspaper open to the travel and lodging section, Asheville Weekly. The photo was blurry, but clear enough to show Rachel had planned carefully. She hadn't fled in panic, she'd left with a plan. The next morning, Ellis went to see Tom Keaton, now 72, living quietly in Warner Robins. When Ellis showed him the bus ticket stub, he went silent for a long moment, then said softly, "She used to mention Asheville, said she wanted to go there in the fall to see the red leaves. I thought it was just idle talk." His eyes were weary, but a spark of hope flickered in them. "If you find anything, let me know. I just want to know if they're at peace." Back at the office, Ellis pinned the torn ticket to the evidence board. The red string connecting Macon to Asheville stretched across the white wall. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, Rachel Keaton's path was visible again. But the biggest question remained: whose was the male DNA in the blood sample? Devin's, or someone else Rachel met along the way? Ellis submitted a request to compare this DNA against expanded genealogical databases from public ancestry platforms, hoping to find distant relatives. Results were expected in a few months. In the meantime, she searched North Carolina records from 1985, missing persons, unidentified bodies, women with young children. One name made her pause: Jane Doe, Asheville, discovered 1987, unidentified female body, blood type O, small scar on the right wrist. Ellis looked at Rachel's file photo, where a bandage was visible on her wrist in the Bluebird Diner camera footage from that year. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't dare conclude yet, but her professional gut said the thread had reconnected. The Keaton case was no longer a mystery dormant in a cold file cabinet. Now, with the blood sample bearing stranger DNA, and the torn Macon, Asheville ticket, it had become the key to unlocking the past, and Detective Nora Ellis knew that behind that door, the truth was waiting. After finding the Macon, Asheville bus ticket, Detective Nora Ellis immediately contacted the Asheville Police Department, APD, for coordination. She believed Rachel Keaton might have lived under a different identity here. Lieutenant Mark Jensen, a veteran APD investigator, took on the case. Together, they combed through residency records, social security numbers, and driver's licenses from 1990-2000, the time frame long enough for Rachel and Lydia to start a new life, if they'd truly made it to North Carolina. 2 weeks later, the search results yielded a name that made Ellis freeze: Helen Moore, born March 12, 1953, matching Rachel Keaton's birth date exactly. According to records, Helen moved to Asheville in 1989, from Georgia, city unspecified. Occupation: part-time secretary at a small clinic. The photo from her 1991 driver's license showed a woman with dark blonde hair, facial features eerily similar to Rachel's. When run through biometric analysis software, the system identified a 90.3% match with Rachel's age-progressed reconstruction. Helen Moore had a daughter named Clara Moore, born in 1976, exactly Lydia Keaton's age. Clara worked at a small bookstore downtown, no criminal record, unmarried, childless, lived reclusively. Ellis felt her pulse quicken when she saw the file photo: gray eyes, tight-lipped smile, nearly an adult replica of 9-year-old Lydia in the 1985 missing persons picture. She and Jensen continued digging into Helen's identity. The birth certificate was reissued in 1987 in Buncombe County, but no original pre-that record existed in state databases. a suspicious detail. Ellis sent Helen's signature to forensics for comparison with Rachel's handwriting from the old library log. Results 82% similarity, strong enough to warrant a surveillance warrant. In January 2023, GBI and APD launched an undercover surveillance operation, monitoring the Moore mother and daughter for 3 months. A team of 3 plainclothes agents rented a house near Woodridge Estates, where the two lived. A small white house with a lavender-planted porch, isolated from neighbors. Weekly security cameras captured footage of a short-haired silver woman, light step, face hauntingly familiar, heading to the market every Tuesday, back by 10 sharp. Neighbors called her Miss Helen, a kind reclusive soul with no close friends. Her daughter, Clara, worked steady shifts at Blue Ridge Books. She drove a silver old Ford Focus, clocked in on time, rarely chatted with anyone. When the GBI tech team matched Clara's face to Lydia Keaton's age-progressed image, the result showed 90% similarity. Ellis stared at the screen, a chill running down her spine. Lydia, the child seen as a victim for nearly 40 years, might be living right there in Asheville, just under a different name. 3 months of surveillance passed with no signs of crime. They live normally, no out-of-state contacts, the report noted. But there's a clear distance between them. Clara's quiet, Helen avoids strangers. Ellis read the surveillance logs over and over, increasingly convinced Rachel had deliberately rebuilt a new life, perhaps to shield her daughter from something. By late March, a new detail emerged. Helen Moore regularly mailed letters to a P.O. box at Knoxville, Tennessee, marked #217. On checking, Ellis discovered the box had once been registered under A. Devon before closing in 2001. The lineage matched Albert Devon, the man wanted in 1985. All the pieces started fitting. Rachel might have fled with Devon, changed names, and maintained contact for years. Ellis called an emergency meeting with Jensen and the GBI agents. She said, "If Devon's still alive, he's the key. But we don't know their real relationship, accomplice, lover or captor." The team agreed to continue house surveillance while expanding the probe to Tennessee. Before leaving Asheville, Ellis drove through Woodridge Estates one last time. Through the purple flower fence, she saw Helen Moore watering plants, while Clara sat reading on the porch, late-day sun gilding her hair. They looked so peaceful that no one would believe their past was a national missing persons case. In the classified report sent to GBI, Ellis wrote at the end, "Subjects Helen Moore and Clara Moore, highly likely Rachel and Lydia Keaton respectively. Maintain surveillance for additional 90 days, and retrieve all records related to P.O. Box #217, Knoxville, Tennessee." Keaton case upgraded to multi-state federal investigation level. As she signed it, the clock read 11:47 p.m. Mountain wind blew through the window, carrying the damp scent of lavender and the chill of Carolina. After nearly 4 decades, the secret Georgia thought buried deep in the cold files was beginning to rise, and Detective Nora Ellis knew she had just touched the living soul of the Keaton case. After 3 months of covert surveillance in Asheville, Detective Nora Ellis and the GBI task force decided to move to the phase of collecting biological evidence to confirm the identities of the 2 women living under the names Helen and Clara Moore. If the DNA results matched, the Keaton case would officially be reopened after nearly 4 decades. The plan was named Operation Lavender, inspired by the lavender flower bed in front of their porch. Police were not allowed direct access to avoid alerting them, so samples had to be collected indirectly, legally, and discreetly. Ellis coordinated with Asheville PD and the Raleigh lab to proceed. On the first day, surveillance noted Helen Moore stopping by Plato's Closet Cafe, a small spot near downtown where she often sat reading the paper every Friday morning. A female GBI undercover agent posed as a server, brought coffee to Helen, and waited until she left. The white porcelain mug still bearing lipstick marks was recovered immediately afterward and placed in a sterile preservation bag. Police noted the time as 10:42 a.m., with every step recorded to ensure legal procedure. On the third day, as Clara left the house for work, a female agent was ordered to enter for a brief check of the bathroom in the surveillance area, under a special search warrant, approved by Buncombe County Court. Next to the sink, they retrieved a still wet toothbrush and placed it in a sealed plastic tube. No one noticed. Within 24 hours, both samples were sent directly to the GBI Crime Lab, Raleigh Division, which specializes in DNA analysis for cold cases. A week later, the lab sent preliminary results. As Ellis opened the envelope, her heart pounded. The report stated, Sample 1 coffee mug, female DNA, 99.98% match with Rachel Keaton's DNA profile on file with GBI. Trunk sample 1985. Sample 2 toothbrush, female DNA, 99.96% match with Lydia Keaton's genetic profile recovered from personal effects. The conference room fell dead silent. Ellis looked up, her voice hoarse. Helen Moore is Rachel Keaton. Clara Moore is Lydia. Nearly 38 years of mystery confirmed in just 2 pages. Lieutenant Mark Jensen of Asheville PD exhaled, so they really have been living here their whole lives, right under our noses. Ellis nodded, but in her eyes there was no relief, only bewilderment. Rachel hadn't died, hadn't been killed. She had lived in hiding for half her life, and dragged her young daughter into decades of deception. By protocol, the GBI transferred the entire file to the Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI), as the case now fell under parental kidnapping and identity fraud. The summary sent over stated clearly, confirmation of true identities of Helen and Clara Moore, use of fake documents in 1987, federal violation. Suspicious connection to Albert Devon P.O. Box in Knoxville, Tennessee. On June 14, 2023, a temporary arrest warrant was prepared but not executed. Ellis wanted to approach Rachel first, in a more human way, not as a criminal. She's been running her whole life, now there's nowhere left to go, she said. To prepare, Ellis reviewed the entire file again. She realized Rachel had been manipulated by Devon, possibly coerced into leaving Georgia under the guise of escape. When Devon vanished, Rachel was forced to continue the false identity to protect Lydia. Reopening the case now wasn't just about seeking justice, it was about reaching a mother who had imprisoned herself in silence for nearly 40 years. In Raleigh, the forensic specialist provided one more detail that stunned everyone. In Rachel's DNA sample, they detected traces of male DNA, partially matching the unidentified sample found in the trunk in 1985. Meaning Albert Devon, or someone connected, might still have been alive when Rachel left Macon. When this news reached the GBI office, Ellis knew she had only one choice: confrontation. The Keaton case was no longer a deadly mystery, but a living story of people still existing, and carrying a truth that couldn't be hidden forever. She wrote the final line in her report to superiors. DNA confirms Helen Moore =, Rachel Keaton. Clara Moore =, Lydia Keaton. Case transferred to federal level. Recommendation: approach witnesses before public disclosure to ensure safety and verify on Albert Devon. Outside the glass door, Asheville in the afternoon, fog thick over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Ellis lightly touched the results envelope, feeling the cold paper. Inside was irrefutable proof, and also the door opening to a truth she knew none of them were ready to face. In December 2023, after DNA results confirmed, Helen and Clara Moore were indeed Rachel and Lydia Keaton, the U.S. District Court for the Western District of North Carolina approved search warrant #482C. Early morning on December 17, in the biting fog of Asheville, the GBI and FBI task force entered the Woodridge Estates neighborhood. Detective Nora Ellis requested no sirens or lights. We're not arresting criminals, we're reopening the truth. Rachel opened the door on their second knock. She stood still, her face calm, silver hair trembling slightly in the wind. I knew this day would come, she said softly. Lydia, now Clara, stood silent, her eyes a mix of fear and resignation. The search proceeded quietly, lasting nearly 4 hours. The small house was tidy, nothing unusual until an agent discovered an old oak box hidden under the floorboards in Rachel's bedroom. When opened, it revealed a chain of evidence that left everyone speechless. First was a fake birth certificate, in the name of Helen Margaret Moore, issued in 1987 in Savannah, Georgia. The embossed seal was faded, and the Social Security number belonged to someone who had died in 1979. This was direct evidence for the federal identity fraud charge. Next was a Polaroid photo of Lydia from the summer of 1985, the little girl beaming with a doll in her arms. The corner read, "Lel Summer 1985. Ellis recognized it immediately as the photo taken with the Polaroid found in the silver Caprice, the only clue ever hinting at their disappearance. At the bottom was a sealed envelope containing 2 other photos. One showed Rachel and Albert Devon at a gas station in Atlanta, with a red Ford F-100 behind them. Rachel wore sunglasses, smiling awkwardly. Devon had his arm around her shoulders, staring straight into the lens. The other captured them in a small motel room, suitcases open on the table, and Greyhound bus tickets. The 2 photos bridged every gap in their 1985 journey out of Georgia. The box also held a few handwritten letter fragments, clearly in Rachel's handwriting. "He said we'd be safe once we passed Asheville. I don't know if I can trust him anymore. If this is wrong, I'll never forgive." Short lines, like whispers from a woman torn between trust and fear. Ellis read each one slowly, sensing Rachel hadn't been fully complicit. She had been helped, but also controlled. Meanwhile, the FBI expanded the investigation into Albert Devon's records. 3 weeks later, results from the Texas Department of Justice arrived. Devon died in a truck accident in Dallas in November 1988, body confirmed by dental records. He had used fake ID as Arthur Devon, working as a long-haul trucker. No signs of criminal activity. With this discovery, the nearly 40-year mystery finally closed. Devon had helped Rachel escape Georgia, then died just 3 years after vanishing. In the summary sent back to GBI, Ellis outlined, Albert Devon helped Rachel Keaton leave Georgia in July 1985. They passed through Atlanta, bought bus tickets to Asheville, where Rachel created a new identity. Devon died in 1988. No direct criminal involvement. Rachel committed parental kidnapping and identity fraud, but statute of limitations expired. In the Asheville PD interrogation room, Rachel sat calmly across from Ellis. On the table was a black and white print of Devon from the accident. "Did you love him?" Ellis asked. Rachel was silent, then whispered, "No. He made me believe I'd be free." A moment later she sighed, "I was scared, of my husband, of the police, of myself. When I left Georgia, I thought it would just be a few weeks. But then Lydia got used to the new name, and I couldn't go back." Ellis didn't react, just nodded. She knew the heart of this case wasn't guilt, but the isolation of a mother who had vanished to preserve a sliver of peace for her daughter. Late afternoon, as the interrogation ended, Ellis left the small oak house. The Carolina sky was pale orange, wind carrying a faint lavender scent. In her hand was the final report, ending with conclusion. Rachel Keaton was helped by Albert Devon to leave Georgia in 1985. After Devon's death, she lived in hiding in Asheville with her daughter Lydia. Cold case file #G1000, 985-1042, closed, verified resolution. Nearly 40 years on, the disappearance that once shocked Georgia closed not with prison or charges, but with an oak box, a few photos, and the silence of a woman who had chosen to erase herself from the world to survive. Early 2024, after the detention order was issued, Rachel Keaton, once known as Helen Moore, was brought to the FBI interrogation room in Asheville. No handcuffs, no commotion, just a 70-year-old woman sitting across from Detective Nora Ellis, her face weary but eyes clear, as if she'd prepared for this day. Ellis started slowly. "Miss Keaton, why did you leave Georgia with Lydia in 1985? Rachel was silent for a long time, then replied, I did it to protect my daughter from danger." Her voice was raspy, not defensive, not trembling. According to her statement, Rachel believed someone was stalking the family. "I saw a man standing outside the house, 2 nights in a row." Tom didn't believe me. The police didn't care either. Ellis asked, "Was that man Albert Devon?" Rachel nodded. "He said he knew I was scared, said he'd help me disappear." Rachel recounted meeting Devon at the library where she worked and how he seemed to understand her more than anyone. Gradually, she believed only he could help her and her daughter escape the threat she couldn't prove. "I thought it would just be a few days," she said. "But then I couldn't go back." She described the night they left, packing quickly in the trunk, taking Lydia, stopping at a gas station on Highway 41 where Devon waited. "I told Tom we were going on a picnic. After that, Devon drove the red F-100 and took us to Atlanta. They stayed overnight in a motel near the Greyhound station. The next morning, he gave her bus tickets to Asheville, telling her, 'After today, you'll be free.'" Ellis placed the torn Macon, Asheville ticket on the table. Rachel stared at it for a long time, then admitted, "I tore the ticket in half and left it behind so they'd think I was dead." That statement told Ellis that Rachel had planned the disappearance carefully. Regarding the anonymous letter sent to police in 1985, Ellis presented new test results. DNA on the envelope flap matched Rachel Keaton, undeniable. "You wrote that letter, didn't you?" Ellis asked. Rachel nodded, eyes down. "I just wanted them to stop looking. I didn't want Lydia growing up in fear and endless questions." She admitted orchestrating the staged disappearance herself, with Devon's help to leave the state. "I paid him $3,000, all my savings. When he died, I was already used to the new name. I didn't go back." Ellis asked, "Did you love him?" Rachel shook her head. "No, I just trusted the wrong person. I thought I was protecting my daughter, but really I bound her to a lie." Rachel's story revealed clearly. Initially, Devon exploited her fear to convince her to flee, but when he died in the 1988 accident, Rachel was too far gone to return. She used the identity Helen Moore, moved through several states, then settled in Asheville, where mother and daughter lived in hiding for nearly 30 years. Ellis reviewed the statement, confirming 4 points Rachel admitted, wrote the anonymous letter to police, actively staged the disappearance, enlisted Albert Devon to prepare fake documents and transportation, used the Helen Moore identity from 1987. All facts aligned perfectly with physical evidence: DNA, Polaroid photo, fake birth certificate, and Devon's records. When signing the transcript, Rachel said only one thing: "If I could do it over, I'd still protect my daughter, just in a different way." Ellis watched her leave the room, feeling both relieved and burdened. The truth, in the end, wasn't a crime, but the solitude of a mother who had locked herself in shadows to hold on to what she thought was safety. In the final report to GBI, Ellis wrote, "Conclusion: Rachel Keaton actively staged the 1985 disappearance to leave the state with her daughter. She confirmed writing the anonymous letter and enlisting Albert Devon's help. Keaton case classified as resolved with confession." Outside, snow blanketed the agency steps. Ellis closed the file, gazing at the empty street. Nearly 40 years later, the disappearance that haunted Georgia was over, not by court ruling, but by the quiet confession of the woman who had once chosen to vanish from her own life. After Rachel Keaton confessed the entire truth, the GBI Cold Case Unit, in coordination with the Georgia State Forensic Institute, launched a campaign to reconstruct the 1985 disappearance journey. The final step to confirm every detail in the confession and close the file #G1985-1042. In the meeting room at GBI Macon headquarters, a large map appeared before the investigative team. On it was the route reconstructed using geographic data and physical evidence: Macon, Athenat, Atlanta, Asheville. Detective Nora Ellis and forensic expert Dr. Thomas Whitaker led the reconstruction of each segment, using 3D technology and analysis of samples stored for nearly 40 years. The GBI determined the starting point at the Keaton house in the suburbs of Macon. From there, Rachel drove the Chevrolet Caprice north to Athens, just as stated in the confession. The red soil sample stuck under the tires was reanalyzed using modern spectroscopy, matching the clay layer in Monroe County, confirming the car had traveled this route. A notable discovery: the old tire tracks recorded in 1985 were now compared to a digital model and matched perfectly with the tires of a 1980 Ford F-100. The vehicle of Albert Devon. Ellis looked up at the screen and softly said, "She didn't imagine Devon. He was really there." At a Texaco gas station in Athens, the reconstruction team found a copy of the gas receipt bearing Rachel's signature. Under UV light, a faded small line appeared, A+R. The A matched the signature style of Devon in the files. This confirmed that the two traveled together, just as Rachel stated. The breakthrough came from the microfilm archive of the Atlanta Media Archives Institute. The expert team recovered 4 blurry frames from the 1985 security camera. Though black and white, it clearly showed Rachel bending down to replace the license plate on the Chevrolet Caprice with a temporary one, while Devon stood nearby watching. This was clear evidence that the disappearance was premeditated, not an impulsive act. At the Greyhound terminal, investigators reviewed the operational records for the Atlanta-Asheville route. In the remaining list, there were 2 cash tickets numbered 7719, matching the torn ticket fragment found in the evidence envelope. According to route data, that bus departed at 7:45 a.m. on June 7, 1985 and arrived in Asheville that afternoon, exactly matching the time Rachel described. Dr. Whitaker used journey reconstruction software to simulate each stop, rest areas, gas stations and the Blue Ridge Mountain pass the bus passed through. When the final light streak on the map stopped at Asheville, Ellis fell silent. The entire escape journey of the Keaton mother and daughter, from the vague confession, was now verified by scientific data. The 200-page reconstruction report indicated that all physical traces, tire marks, soil samples, camera footage, bus tickets, matched Rachel's confession perfectly. No evidence of violence or abduction was found after leaving Macon. Additional analysis also explained the contradictions that had existed for nearly 40 years. Blood stain in the trunk, Rachel's, from a scratch while loading luggage. Anonymous letter, written in Rachel's handwriting, confirming the intentional staging. Polaroid evidence and bus ticket, both part of the plan to create a cover for the disappearance. In the wrap-up meeting, Ellis presented briefly, there was no kidnapping. This was a carefully prepared plan to leave the state, with assistance, a clear itinerary, fake evidence to mislead. Rachel Keaton wasn't taken by anyone, she chose to disappear herself. The GBI director concluded, the Keaton file is proof of the thin line between victim and someone who proactively creates tragedy. On March 22, 2024, the cold case file hash, G1985-1042 was marked, reconstructed and closed. The journey map was printed large and hung in the GBI file storage with the caption, wrote, Macon, Athens, Atlanta, Asheville, complete reconstruction of the actual journey of Rachel and Lydia Keaton, verified in 2024. When the lights in the meeting room turned off, Ellis still stood looking at the simulation model on the screen, the thin light streak moving slowly, then disappearing into the Blue Ridge forests. Every question, every doubt after 39 years now became scientific data, but in her mind, still echoed the words Rachel uttered in the final interrogation. I just wanted to protect my daughter. Ellis softly said to herself, and the price was a lifetime of running away. The Keaton file closed, but for the investigators, it remained a reminder that sometimes, crime doesn't lie in criminal acts, but in the moment when people lose faith to the point of having to erase their own identity to survive. After completing the journey reconstruction report, the GBI cold case unit opened the final phase, re-examining all old evidence to determine the extent of Albert Devon's involvement in Rachel Keaton's plan to leave the state. The goal was to find physical evidence confirming that Rachel not only fled, but actively planned with Devon. In April 2024, the Georgia State Forensic Institute reopened evidence bag F1985-14, sealed for nearly 40 years. Inside was a small gray-silver fabric fiber collected from the trunk of the Chevrolet Caprice. In 1985, this sample was noted as unidentified because the technology at the time wasn't sufficient to analyze synthetic fibers. Under the electron comparison microscope, Dr. Thomas Whitaker noticed the fiber had a fine twisted structure, polymer coating, and matte metallic sheen, characteristic of industrial polyester used for protective clothing. Comparison results with the National Materials Database matched the uniform type of the Devon's Auto Shop chain in Athens, where Albert Devon was once the owner. A small but significant detail, it proved Devon was in Rachel's car at least one day before she disappeared. Ellis, upon receiving the results, only said softly, "Finally, we have evidence he was involved from the beginning." During the file review process, the investigative team also found a castor oil purchase receipt dated February 7, 1985, initialed RK. When examined under UV light, the handwriting became clear and matched Rachel's signature in the Macon library files. On the back of the receipt was faintly printed Devon's Auto Shop, Athens, Georgia. This evidence filled the time gap. Rachel had met Devon 3 days before disappearing, to repair the car or prepare for the journey out of state. Chemical analysis showed the oil residue on the paper was SAE10W40, the exact type used at Devon's shop. The blue ink on the signature identified a Papermate ballpoint pen, produced in 1984, reinforcing authenticity. The technical team concluded Rachel brought the car to Devon's auto shop, and during luggage loading, a fiber from his uniform fell into the trunk. A seemingly meaningless trace now became the most important evidence. In the internal reporting meeting, Ellis projected the enlarged image of the fiber on the screen. "This is the link between the confession and the scene," she said. "No coercion. Rachel and Devon planned together, prepared together. The disappearance was their product, not an accident." Dr. Whitaker added, "This fabric type was only distributed to the Devon's Auto Shop system in 1984, 1985. The location found in the trunk, behind the driver's seat, indicates someone leaned into the cargo area to load items. It can't be coincidence." Ellis gave a brief conclusion. "Gray polyester fiber matches Devon's Auto Shop uniform. Castrol receipt initialed RK. Proves Rachel met Devon before leaving the state." Conclusion: Rachel and Devon deliberately collaborated to stage the disappearance. The GBI confirmed this as the final evidence needed to close the remaining chain of hypotheses. Ellis added to the file code 14, a forensic link confirmed, stamped red verified. That afternoon, she stood in the lab, looking through the microscope. On the slide, the thin polyester fiber sparkled like a thread connecting two fates, the desperate woman and the man who once manipulated her fears. Ellis added a handwritten note to the report. Supplemental evidence confirms direct connection between Rachel Keaton and Albert Devon before the disappearance date. The plan to leave the state was prepared at least 3 days before April 7, 1985. As she left the room, she looked through the glass door, the Macon sunset gilding the lab buildings. The story of the 1985 disappearance now closed with a small piece of fabric, but it told everything, that truth sometimes hides in the smallest details, and just one fiber is enough to pull the entire past back into the light. In March 2024, after nearly 40 years of investigation and reconstructing the entire journey, the GBI Cold Case Unit officially completed the Rachel Keaton case file. All evidence from DNA results, RK, receipt, Devon's Auto Shop uniform fiber, to the anonymous letter written by Rachel herself, showed this was not a kidnapping, but a deliberate plan to leave the state. On March 14, the GBI director signed federal arrest warrant GA-24-1075, charging Rachel Keaton with 3 counts: kidnapping of a minor, kidnapping a minor, even if her own child; identity fraud, using false identity to evade the law; obstruction of justice, obstructing criminal investigation. The next morning, federal forces and the Asheville Police Department surrounded the Woodridge Estates neighborhood. When Detective Nora Ellis knocked on the door, Rachel opened it immediately, showing no fear. "I knew this would come," she said calmly, then asked to see her daughter for a moment before leaving. The arrest proceeded in silence. During the house search, police discovered 3 new evidence items sealed with the file. Lydia's crystal necklace, once found in the car in 1985. An unsent letter to Albert Devon, reading, "If you're still alive, please leave us alone." A set of fake documents, under the name Helen Margaret Moore, including birth certificate, social security card, and old tax records. These artifacts reinforced that Rachel had planned in detail to disappear from Georgia and maintain the false identity for nearly 4 decades. When Ellis read the Miranda rights, Rachel only replied softly, "I've been waiting for this day for a long time." That afternoon, at the press conference at GBI Macon headquarters, the GBI director declared, "After 39 years, the Keaton disappearance case is closed. No one can run forever under another name. Justice may be slow, but it never loses its way." On March 20th, Rachel was extradited back to Macon, where she once called home. The Macon Chronicle ran a large headline, "Mother Who Vanished Returns Home in Handcuffs, 39 Years Later." In court, Rachel appeared in gray prison clothes, her face calm. In the back row, Tom Keaton, her ex-husband, sat silently, his eyes mixed with anger and pity. When the judge asked, "Do you plead guilty or not?" Rachel answered, "I didn't kidnap anyone. I just kept my daughter alive." Prosecutor Eleanor Harris read the indictment. Defendant Rachel Keaton, in July 1985, intentionally left the state of Georgia with her minor daughter, using false identity, and through deceptive actions, obstructed the criminal investigation process for 39 years. The prosecution presented the entire chain of evidence: Devon's fiber in the car, RK receipt, security camera photo of Rachel changing the license plate, anonymous letter, and fake documents. All proved Rachel and Devon planned to leave the state at least 3 days in advance. The defense argued that Rachel acted in a state of panic, psychologically manipulated by Devon, and believing she was protecting her child from an imagined threat. However, the prosecution emphasized she never reported to the police, nor sought help. Instead, she created a fake scene and deliberately left misleading evidence. The hearing lasted 1 hour. Judge Harold W. Fisher concluded, "The court has sufficient grounds to indict defendant Rachel Keaton on the 3 above counts. She will be held in custody at Bibb County Jail pending trial in May 2024. Rachel showed no reaction. As she was led out of the courtroom, camera flashes went off continuously. Ellis stood in the hallway, watching the silhouette of the woman who was once the center of Georgia's biggest disappearance case. She felt clearly, the truth had finally been brought to light, but no one felt victorious. In the internal memo, Ellis wrote, "Rachel Keaton arrested on March 14, 2024, in Asheville, North Carolina, extradited to Macon, Georgia. Evidence: Lydia's necklace, letter to Albert Devon, fake documents, under Helen Moore. Charges: kidnapping of a minor, identity fraud, obstruction of justice. Keaton file status transferred, federal prosecution." At the bottom of the page, she added a short line, like a closing for nearly 40 years of investigation. "Sometimes, justice doesn't punish anyone. It just makes the truth unable to run away any longer." In May 2025, nearly 40 years after Rachel Keaton disappeared with her daughter, the Bibb County Courthouse in Macon, Georgia, opened what would become the most anticipated trial in the history of investigating the state's cold case files. Crowds packed the hallways, national media set up cameras early. In the front row, Detective Nora Ellis sat silently, her hands gripping a small notebook, the result of 2 years of pursuing the truth to its end. As the courtroom door opened, Rachel Keaton appeared. She wore a beige prison jumpsuit, her silver hair neatly pinned up, walking slowly. No one would recognize the woman who vanished in 1985 anymore. In the back row, Tom Keaton, her ex-husband, now nearly 75, sat with his head bowed, his eyes never leaving Rachel. Between them was the distance of an entire lifetime. Two elderly people bound to a disappearance that once shocked America. Judge Eleanor Wexler presided. She read the indictment briefly but firmly. The defendant Rachel Keaton is charged with 3 counts: kidnapping of a minor, identity fraud, and obstruction of justice. The court acknowledges that the defendant has cooperated with the investigation and provided a partial confession. However, the conduct spanning 39 years has caused severe legal and societal consequences. The trial lasted 4 days, each packed to capacity with spectators. Prosecutor Mark Raines from the Georgia Attorney General's office presented what was considered the most meticulous file in GBI history. On the large screen, he displayed each piece of evidence one by one: reconstructions of the Macon, Asheville route, the torn bus ticket, anonymous letters matching Rachel's DNA, and especially the uniform fabric fiber from the caprice that matched Devon's auto shop. Raines spoke slowly, his gaze fixed on the jury. Mrs. Keaton was not kidnapped by anyone. She staged the scene, swapped license plates, wrote anonymous letters, and left the state with her daughter. This was not impulsive behavior, but a meticulous plan, prepared days before the disappearance. The prosecution also presented Rachel's unsent letters to Devon, proving the two had coordinated at least 3 days before leaving Macon. On the screen, Rachel's trembling handwriting appeared clearly: "If you're still alive, please leave us alone." Raines concluded, the defendant may not have acted with malicious intent, but her actions caused law enforcement to waste decades and left the Keaton family in torment. The law cannot view this as an emotional mistake. This was a choice. Defense attorney Harper Jennings, an expert in criminal psychology, offered a counter-argument. He did not deny Rachel's actions but emphasized psychological factors and marital trauma. Jennings presented a copy of the 1984 medical records, showing Rachel had been treated for postpartum depression and exhibited prolonged anxiety symptoms. "She didn't act like a criminal," he said. "She acted like a mother who believed the world was collapsing around her." He recounted how Rachel had reported being stalked to the police, but was not believed, and how Devon, with his criminal past, had exploited that fear to manipulate her. "We can punish the act," Jennings concluded, "but we cannot convict a mother for choosing fear over violence." The prosecution objected, arguing that Rachel was still mentally competent when forging documents and deliberately cutting off contact for 39 years. However, the jury noted the psychological factors as mitigating circumstances. In the morning session, Tom Keaton was called to the witness stand. His hands trembled as he held the microphone. "I thought she was killed. I spent my whole life believing that. Now I just want to know, why didn't she come back?" Rachel did not look at him. When allowed to speak, she only said softly, "I didn't know how to come back. I was afraid that if I did, I would destroy what I was trying to hold on to." In the afternoon, Lydia Keaton, now 49, appeared. She stood before the court, her voice steady and low. "I forgive my mother. She was wrong, but she believed she was protecting me. I just want her to have peace." Lydia's words silenced the courtroom. Ellis, sitting in the press row, felt her eyes blur. After the closing arguments, Judge Wexler asked Rachel to stand for sentencing. Her voice was clear but not cold. "Mrs. Rachel Keaton, the court notes that you fully cooperated with law enforcement and admitted to your actions. However, for 39 years, you deliberately concealed your identity and obstructed justice. The court sentences you to 10 years in prison, with parole consideration after 5 years for good behavior. The courtroom fell deathly silent. Rachel nodded faintly, her expression calm. As the bailiff approached to cuff her, she turned back to look at Lydia and smiled. "You're safe now." Ellis stepped outside, taking a deep breath. The May wind carried the dry, scorching heat of Georgia, but for her, the case had closed in the most complete way possible, justice and humanity coexisting. In the final memo submitted to the GBI Cold Case Registry, Ellis wrote, "Keaton case. File #G1985-1042, officially closed. Defendant pled guilty and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment, parole after 5 years. All evidence stored at GBI Macon Evidence Vault." The 39-year journey for the truth ends on May 27, 2025. She paused her pen, adding a small line at the bottom, not for the report, but for herself. "No one is entirely innocent, but some carry guilt only because they love too much." The Keaton file closed. In the GBI's cold storage, the thick, heavy dossier was placed in the resolved cases section, among hundreds of others. But for those who had touched this story, it was never just a case, it was a reminder that sometimes, the line between crime and motherhood is so thin that one wrong choice can make an entire life vanish forever. In August 2025, 3 months after the Macon trial concluded, the GBI Cold Case Division released the official summary report on the Keaton case. File #G1985-1042, marking the end of the nearly 40-year investigation. The report not only documented the resolution process, but was regarded as a national model for handling and rehabilitating cold cases. At the release conference in GBI Atlanta headquarters, Director Harrison Cole opened "The Keaton case is not just the story of a missing mother. It is proof of the power of science, perseverance, and proper evidence storage." The 400-page report was divided into 4 main sections, focusing on 3 key technical pillars that cracked the case: genetic genealogy DNA, long-term evidence management, and federal-state collaboration mechanisms. According to the report, the breakthrough in the Keaton case came in 2018, when the GBI Cold Case Unit began using genetic genealogy databases to rematch old DNA samples stored in the file. With new technology, the Raleigh Division Lab could separate a mixed DNA sample between Rachel and an unidentified male in the small blood stain in the Caprice trunk. The data was cross-referenced on national platforms GAD Match and Family Tree DNA, allowing the identification of an indirect genetic link between Lydia Keaton and Helen Moore, the alias Rachel used. This was the turning point that shifted the case from unidentified victim status to suspected staging. Ellis, in her annotations, wrote, "Without genetic genealogy, the Keaton file would still be gathering dust in storage." Technology gave voice to blood samples dried since 1985. The report recommended that GBI continue investing in expanded DNA databases, while coordinating with the FBI and the National Institute of Justice to establish new legal standards for using genetic genealogy in civil investigations. The second section of the report was hailed as a golden lesson for the entire investigative field. The blood sample, fabric fiber, anonymous letter, and even the Polaroid camera were preserved in moisture-proof paper bags rather than plastic, seemingly minor, but crucial for maintaining DNA stability over decades. Dr. Thomas Whitaker, head of forensics, wrote in his commentary, "If the evidence had been sealed in plastic back then, moisture would have destroyed the DNA and fibers. Proper preservation standards inadvertently preserved the only physical testimony." Thanks to the small gray fabric sample in the trunk, GBI established the link between Rachel and Devon's auto shop, a detail that led to reconstructing the entire route. The report emphasized the importance of long-term evidence preservation units, where all pre-1990 files were being reviewed, for recoverability, using modern techniques. The Keaton case was one of the first to implement a three-tier collaboration process: GBI, FBI, Asheville PD, likened to a model of vertical linkage in ancient case cracking. GBI provided data, the FBI offered genetic tracing technology support, and Asheville PD handled on-site oversight and actual sample collection. The report noted that continuous coordination between agencies prevented the case from stalling legally when crossing state lines. Ellis, in a post-resolution interview, said, "We learned that no single agency can solve cold cases alone. Each state holds a piece of the puzzle. Only when pieced together does the truth emerge." Thanks to this model, GBI proposed establishing the 2026 Cold Case Federal Task Force, a permanent investigative alliance among 5 southeastern states, to handle disappearances from the 1980s, 1990s. As the presentation wrapped up, Director Cole invited Detective Nora Ellis to the podium. Amid thunderous applause, she received the Best Cold Case Resolution 2025 Inches Award, the highest honor in Georgia's investigative field. On stage, Ellis said simply, "I didn't crack the case alone. Science, patience and faith did that. I was just the one piecing together the fragments time forgot." A portion of the report was sent to the National Institute of Justice, NIJ, becoming official training material for cold case investigation courses. In the annotations to NIJ, GBI emphasized, "The Keaton case proves that truth can outlive people. What is needed most is a system that knows how to preserve the voice of evidence." At the end of the summary, the final page bore a simple yet moving line: Case G1985-1042, resolved after 39 years, lesson learned, every box in the evidence room holds a story still waiting to be heard. As the conference ended, Ellis stood looking through the GBI building's glass window. Atlanta's summer sun shone down on the gently waving flags. In her mind echoed Rachel's words from the courtroom, "I just wanted to protect my daughter." She smiled faintly. Now, the Keaton case was no longer a haunting obsession, but a chapter in U.S. investigative history, where science, perseverance, and humanity had together accomplished the seemingly impossible. When Rachel Keaton's sentence was handed down, and the GBI's official investigation report was released, the ripple effects of the case spread across Georgia. Newspapers splashed bold headlines on their front pages: "Mother and daughter found after 40 years. From Macon to Atlanta, from local papers to national television, the story of a mother who vanished with her daughter, only to be found after 4 decades, became a topic the public couldn't look away from. Reporters called it Georgia's longest disappearance solved by DNA science in state history. TV news replayed old footage: the silver Chevrolet Caprice, abandoned by Lake Juliette, the torn bus ticket, and blurry security cam clips of Rachel swapping plates. But now, those details were no longer symbols of crime, they were lessons about human limits between fear and love. On social media, thousands of comments flooded in within days. Many empathized, calling Rachel a mother who fled out of love, but there were also plenty of opinions that she had robbed her daughter of a real life for nearly 40 years. An Atlanta paper commented, "Where is the line between protection and deprivation? When love turns into obsession, justice must redefine it." Psychologists and criminologists were interviewed. They said the Keaton case reflected the complex reality of family abductions, where perpetrator and victim roles can swap. Dr. Ellen Carver, a lecturer at Emory Law School, noted, "Technology can uncover DNA, but only humanity can decode motive." Rachel Keaton is proof that not every sin stems from malice. Right after the trial, the Georgia State Police Academy incorporated the Keaton case into its official training curriculum, under the course title, Investigating Historical Abductions. The Keaton Model, the course focused on recovering old evidence, applying genetic genealogy, and leveraging psychosocial factors in long-term missing persons investigations. At the opening ceremony, Detective Nora Ellis was invited as a guest speaker. She recounted her 2-year truth-seeking journey to hundreds of cadets and said, "We investigate not just to punish. We investigate to hear the stories time has buried." After her speech, the Macon Chronicle ran an editorial titled, "Ellis Closes the Circle and Opens a New Chapter for Justice." The piece praised her as an icon of the new generation of investigators, where digital meets compassion. But the case's impact didn't stop in professional circles. Georgia state authorities quickly issued new protocols for storing and testing DNA in old files. Accordingly, all evidence from before 1995 would be reviewed, digitized, and preserved to federal standards, while establishing the historical DNA index managed by GBI. This was the direct legacy of Keaton, giving hundreds of similar files a chance to reopen. In Macon, a small plaque was erected near Lake Juliette, where Rachel's car was found years ago. It read, "Dedicated to all who were lost but never forgotten." Locals still brought flowers to place there, not to commemorate crime, but to remember a story of truth found however late. In year-end news roundups, the Keaton case was selected as one of the top 10 justice stories of 2025. Documentary filmmakers from Netflix and CNN contacted GBI for file rights to produce films. Ellis declined to appear on camera, saying only, "I've said enough. Now let the story tell the rest." For the investigative community, Keaton became an academic turning point. It proved that justice isn't just in prison cells, but in the ability to uncover truth, even if the wrongdoer is no longer young, and the motive isn't entirely dark. A year after the sentencing, Lydia Keaton, now living quietly in Asheville, sent a letter to Ellis. It contained just a few lines. "Thank you for giving my mother a chance to tell the truth. I lost my childhood, but I got myself back." Ellis kept the letter in her desk drawer, next to her silver GBI badge. For her, that was the real reward, not the best cold case resolution trophy, but the feeling that every final piece had clicked into place. At the end of 2025, when GBI released the lessons from the Keaton case report, the document's closing line read clearly, "Time may fade every trace, but it can never hide the truth. Time may fade every trace, but it can never hide the truth." That phrase, later engraved on the wall at the GBI Cold Case Registry, served as a reminder to all who passed. No matter how long the time, a case only truly ends when truth is acknowledged, not by judgment, but by the light of understanding and compassion. The Keaton story gives us a very American mirror on how fear, technology, and the legal system intersect in everyday life. Rachel believed she was protecting her daughter by leaving Macon, abandoning the Chevrolet Caprice by Lake Juliette, swapping plates at the gas station, tearing the Macon, Asheville bus ticket, and writing the anonymous letter. Don't look for them. But 40 years later, it was those small details, the letter with Rachel's DNA, Lydia's Polaroid photo, the polyester fiber matching Devon's auto shop uniform in Athens, the oil receipt signed RK that brought the truth to light. First lesson: when family falls into crisis, talk early, and trust support channels, marriage counseling, mental health hotlines, local police. Instead of isolating and handling it alone like Rachel, unchecked fear easily turns into decisions that rob a child's childhood. Second lesson: in American society, faith in institutions is as vital as faith in oneself. The collaboration of GBI, FBI, and Asheville PD, the trial in Bibb County Court, and genetic genealogy, showed how modern justice operates through cooperation and science. If you're a victim of domestic violence or stalking, preserve evidence, report officially. Don't destroy traces. Third lesson: communities and organizations can prevent tragedy through protocols. The Keaton Protocol, Historical DNA Index, also reminds each of us to safeguard files, photos and items safely, because sometimes a small fabric fiber will save an entire story. Ultimately, the court's decision, 10 years in prison, parole after 5, affirms that justice balances law and compassion. Choose transparency, seek help early, and believe time may fade traces, but it cannot hide the truth. If you believe justice, though slow, will always uncover truth, hit subscribe to join us in exploring more cold cases cracked after decades. Thank you for following the Keaton story. See you in the next episode, where another American mystery will be unveiled.